The negotiation chamber aboard the Verdant Claw had been carefully prepared. Soft lighting, temperature controls adjusted for human comfort, even a table made of synthetic wood to ease the tension. Lieutenant Kayla Dre stood across from Ambassador Vexthor, her hands clasped behind her back, her voice steady despite the weight of 3 billion lives hanging on her words. "What humanity offers isn't submission," Kayla said, her brown eyes never leaving the ambassador's 4 gleaming ones. "It's partnership. Your collective has conquered 17 species, but you've never had allies who chose the plasma bolt." Tore through her chest before the word "you" could leave her lips. Kayla crumpled, her body hitting the synthetic wood with a sound that seemed too quiet for what it meant. Blood pooled beneath her, spreading like a dark constellation across the pale floor. The shooter, a junior officer from the collective's security detail, stood frozen, weapon still raised, his breathing rapid and panicked. Ambassador Vexthor's mandibles clicked in shock. "What have you done?" But the shooter wasn't looking at the ambassador. His multifaceted eyes were locked on the doorway, where Rin Taller and 5 other human cubs had appeared. They were children. The youngest couldn't have been more than 7 standard years old, the oldest perhaps 12. They wore simple clothes, ship uniforms modified for their small frames, and their faces were unnervingly blank. No tears streaked their cheeks. No screams tore from their throats. They simply stood there staring at Lieutenant Dre's body with the stillness of ancient statues. "Cubs," Vexthor whispered, using the human term he'd learned during the negotiations. His culture revered young ones above all else. To witness them in the presence of death, especially the death of their guardian, filled him with a horror his species had no words for. Rin Taylor, the eldest, stepped forward first. Her blonde hair was tied back in a practical braid, and her blue eyes, so much like Kayla's, surveyed the scene with clinical precision. The other children followed her lead, moving in perfect silence, forming a semicircle around the shooter. The collective officer began to tremble. "Stay back," he hissed, weapon swinging wildly between the small figures. "I'll shoot. You won't," Rin said quietly. Her voice carried no threat, only certainty. The shooter's weapon arm began to lower, though his will fought against it. The cubs moved closer, not rushing, not attacking, simply walking with the inevitability of a tide. Their footsteps synchronized, creating a rhythm that seemed to bypass hearing and resonate directly in the chest. "What are you doing?" Vexthor demanded, his own security team unsure whether to intervene. Rin didn't answer him. She stopped 3 feet from the shooter, tilted her head and asked, "Last words?" The phrase hung in the air like a blade. The shooter's legs gave out and he fell to his knees, weapon clattering away. I was ordered to. She was going to." "Last words?" another cub repeated, voice identical in tone and inflection. "Last words?" came a third voice, then a fourth, then a fifth. The shooter's face contorted in terror. "Please, I didn't mean she was human. They said humans were weak, that they would." Rin knelt down, bringing her face level with his. "Lieutenant Dre was teaching us about your species today," she said conversationally. "Did you know that your people crystallize when you die? That your bodies turn to beautiful geometric patterns that last for centuries?" She thought it was the most elegant thing she'd ever learned about another species. The shooter's mandibles quivered. She was going to propose a cultural exchange, Rin continued. Human children would learn from collective elders. Your cubs would learn from ours. She believed in bridges. Rin's hand moved, not to strike, but to place something in the shooter's palm. A small crystal pendant, a gift Kayla had been planning to present after the negotiations. "We learned something else today," one of the younger cubs said, stepping forward. "We learned what happens when someone hurts our teacher. When someone hurts our family," another added. The cubs stood in perfect silence again, and that silence was more deafening than any scream. Ambassador Vexthor felt his respiratory system constrict. He had studied humans for cycles, had read their histories, their wars, their literature. He knew of their capacity for violence, their vengeful gods, their saying about sleeping giants. But this calculated coldness from their young, this was something else entirely. My security officer will face justice, Vexthor said quickly, his voice cracking with urgency. By our laws, by your laws, by any standard you name. The collective does not condone this action. The collective just killed our chance at peace, Rin said, standing up and turning her back on the shooter with dismissive finality. She walked to Kayla's body, knelt beside it, and gently closed the lieutenant's eyes. The other cubs joined her, forming a protective circle around their fallen guardian. Only then, shielded from view, did the first tear fall. Rin Taylor wiped it away quickly, her jaw set. When she stood and faced the ambassador again, her expression had returned to that terrible blankness. Lieutenant Dre had a message for us to deliver if anything happened to her. She made us memorize it when we came aboard your ship. Vexthor's hearts sank. Tell them, Rin recited, her voice steady despite the grief that surely raged beneath, that humanity protects its young by teaching them the cost of violence. Tell them that our children do not weep for vengeance, but for wasted potential. Tell them that the most dangerous thing in the universe is not a human warrior, but a human child who has learned that some people cannot be reasoned with. The cubs turned as one and began walking toward the exit. At the doorway, Rin paused and looked back at the shooter, who remained collapsed on the floor, clutching the crystal pendant like a lifeline. Your last words weren't very good, she said simply. Lieutenant Dre deserved better. As the children disappeared into the corridor, Ambassador Vexthor realized with crystalline clarity that the collective had just made the worst mistake in its 3,000-year history. They hadn't just killed a negotiator. They had shown humanity's children exactly who they were, and human children, Vexthor now understood with chilling certainty, never forgot their lessons.